When Petru Ivanovich Sokolov stepped onto the stage of the Factory Club on May 9, 1954, an old gold pocket watch with an engraved cover gleamed on his wrist. That watch, which Andrei Volkov had last seen on his father's wrist, a moment before Petru Grigorovich Vasiliev pulled the trigger. 11 years had passed. 11 years. Andrei lived with the memory of ash, screams, and the smell of burnt flesh. For 11 years, he had searched for the face with the white scar above the eyebrow. And there he was, 20 meters away from him, under the portrait of Lenin, illuminated by red flags, his family's murderer receiving applause for heroism. Vasiliev had become Sokolov. The executioner had become a veteran. The tormentor had become a hero. The village of Krasnîi Bor was burned on August 23, 1943, early in the morning, when the fog still lay over the fields. It was one of the hundreds of nameless villages in the Bryansk region that disappeared from the maps in those years without a trace and without remembrance. 48 households, 213 inhabitants, 3 wells, 1 church without a dome, and 1 school with 4 grades. By noon that day, nothing remained but charred beams and bodies contorted in their final agony. Andrei Volkov was 15 years old when he learned to distinguish the smell of burning wood from that of burning human flesh. This knowledge came quickly, in a few hours, and remained forever. It imprinted itself on his memory deeper than any textbook, deeper than the prayers he had learned from his mother. That morning, his mother had sent him to Marfa, the midwife, for pickled cucumbers. His father had been sick for the 3rd week. The fever wouldn't leave him, and his mother believed in brine. Andrei dressed reluctantly, went out into the yard where it smelled of dew and stale hay, and walked 3 houses down to Marfa's izba. The old woman met him at the threshold, told him to go down into the cellar himself. Her knees hurt. She couldn't bend down. The cellar was deep, the steps steep, the small door heavy, made of oak. Andrei went down, found the jar of cucumbers, then saw another with pickled apples and decided to take them both. Greed saved his life. When he heard the first shots, he froze with the jars in his hands, not understanding what was happening. The shots were close, short, different from hunting shots. Then came the sound of doors being broken down and screams. Of women, of children, of men, merging into a single inhuman howl. Andrei climbed the steps and opened the small door just a finger's width. Through the crack, he saw boots, German, polished, and others, worse, handmade, wrapped in rags, Russian. He heard commands in broken Russian and in a clear, native, Smolensk dialect. The voice commanded curtly, without emotion, as if at a kolkhoz meeting. Andrei didn't immediately understand whose voice it was, but his heart had already begun to pound, as if before a storm or a fight. He put the small door back, leaving only a thin crack for light and air, and pressed himself against the earthen wall of the cellar. The jars slipped from his hands, shattered. The cucumbers and apples rolled onto the dirt floor. The brine spread in a cold puddle. Andrei didn't notice. Through the crack, he saw only feet and the lower parts of bodies. He saw them drag his neighbor, Uncle Alexandru. His broken, wire-rimmed glasses dragged on the ground. He saw his mother pass, barefoot, only in a nightgown. A hand shoved her back with a rifle butt. He saw the small feet of his sister Katyusha. She was 7 years old and always wore red sandals, sent from Moscow by relatives. The red sandals dragged on the dusty road, leaving 2 thin trails. Then he heard his father's voice, weak, sick, interrupted by coughing, but firm. That's how he spoke when he was explaining something important. His father was asking something about partisans, about an order, about justice. He was saying there were no partisans here, only collective farmers, old people, children. He was demanding, not begging, demanding, calling someone by name. Petru Grigorovich was saying, "Father, but you are one of us. You are from the next village. You know us." And the other voice answered, himself, known since childhood, Petru Grigorovich Vasiliev, from the village of Zabelye, 3 versts away through the forest. That Vasiliev, who before the war had worked as a forester, used to come to Krasnîi Bor for holidays, drank with the men, danced with the women. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a white scar above his right eyebrow, a mark from a boar's tusk during a hunt. Andrei remembered how his father had treated him to samogon on Easter of 1939. How Vasiliev had laughed, telling stories about wolves. Now Vasiliev was not laughing. His voice was calm, businesslike, almost bored. He said that an order was an order, that the village was listed as a partisan base, that the decision had been made, that discussions were useless. Then there was a blow, the dull sound of a body falling. Then a short silence, if one doesn't count the weeping and prayers. Then volleys. First one, then a second, then a long burst from an automatic rifle, then screams. Of those running, falling, dying. Then the crackling of fire. They set the houses on fire. The smell of smoke penetrated even the cellar, thick, stinging, with a mixture of something Swedish. Andrei covered his ears with his palms, closed his eyes, pressed his forehead against the earthen wall. But it didn't help. He heard everything. Everything. Every shot, every scream, every fall. He heard someone calling for his mother. He heard a child crying, and how that cry was cut short. He heard laughter, drunk, triumphant laughter of the killers. He stayed in the cellar until evening, without moving, without coming out, even when all the sounds had died down and only silence remained, complete and terrifying. He was afraid they were still there, afraid they would find him, afraid to see what was up there. When it became completely dark, he slowly pushed the small door. It opened with a slight creak. He came out, straightened up, looked around. The village no longer existed. The houses were burning or had already gone out. Black skeletons with red embers instead of windows. Smoke rose in a column, covering the stars. The air was hot, dry, hard to breathe. Bodies everywhere. On the road, in the yards, near the wells, lay piled up, face down, on their sides, in contorted positions. Some had burned with the houses. Others lay in heaps where they had been shot en masse. Andrei walked slowly, stumbling, not knowing where to go or why. His feet carried him on their own. He found his parents in the barn. The barn hadn't burned. They probably hadn't gotten to it or had forgotten. There was a pile of bodies, thrown all together, indiscriminately. His mother lay on top, covering Katyusha. His mother's face was calm, almost alive. Katyusha was holding a rag doll. His father lay separately at the entrance, the back of his head shattered, eyes open. The watch was not on his wrist. His father's wrist was bare. Andrei saw it immediately. The white stripe on his father's tanned wrist, where the watch had always been. The gold pocket watch with engraving, inherited from his grandfather. His grandfather's initials on the cover, G.A.V., Grigory Alexeyevich Volkov, and the year 1891. This watch his father wore every day, wound it every morning. He kept it like a relic, and now it was gone. Andrei stood among the bodies and looked at the white stripe on his dead father's wrist. His mind was empty. He had no thoughts, no tears, not even pain, just a cold, endless void. Then something broke inside. Not suddenly, slowly, like ice cracking on a river in spring, and in place of the void came something else. Rage. A pure, icy, absolute rage. He left the barn, found a shovel, started digging. He dug all night. He dug a mass grave, large, deep, dragged the bodies there, his parents, his sister, the neighbors, all of them. He couldn't bury them all. He didn't have the strength, but he buried his own and about 20 more people. He left the others, covered the grave, tamped down the earth, put up a cross made of 2 burnt planks. When it got light, he walked around the ashes one more time, gathered stones, placed them in a row in front of the barn. 48 stones for the number of households. Then he added 3 more for the wells, and 1 large one for the church, and 1 sharp, black, burnt one for himself, for the one who had died yesterday and would never return. Then he stood before the cross, wiped his face, stained with soot and earth, and made an oath. Not loudly, not pathetically. He simply said into the void where the village had been, "I will find you, Petru Grigorovich Vasiliev. I will find you, wherever you are, and I will kill you. This is a promise. The last thing I can do for them." Then he left for the forest. He did not return to Krasnîi Bor until the end of the war. Andrei was not immediately accepted into the partisan detachment. A 15-year-old boy, weak, with an empty gaze, and the smell of burning on his clothes. There were many like him after the punitive operations, and they didn't take everyone. Many broke, became a burden, cried at night, couldn't hold a weapon. But the detachment commander, a former history teacher from Bryansk, a tough and patient man, looked Andrei in the eyes and nodded. There was no childhood left in those eyes. There was a mature, old hatred. The commander asked if Andrei knew how to shoot. Andrei replied that he would learn. He asked if he would be able to kill. Andrei replied that he would. Not immediately, not on the first try, but he would. The commander gave him a rifle, an old 3-line without a bayonet, and 12 cartridges. He taught him to load, to aim, to shoot. He told him that each cartridge was the life of a German or a traitor, and it must be spent with precision. Andrei learned quickly. It turned out that hatred is an excellent teacher. It didn't hinder his aim, didn't make his hands tremble, didn't whisper to him of mercy. It was simply cold, clear, precise. After 1 month, Andrei participated in his first ambush on a German convoy. He killed the sentry, hit him in the chest from 30 meters. He watched him fall, twitch a few times and grow still. He felt nothing, no pity, no joy, no guilt. He just reloaded the rifle and began to wait for the next one. After 3 months, he participated in blowing up a railway echelon. After half a year, in an attack on a police station. After 1 year, the commander entrusted him with a sniper rifle, a trophy, German, with a telescopic sight. Andrei shot well, calmly, without rushing, without trembling. Every German in the sight transformed into that Vasiliev from his home village. Every policeman, every executioner, every traitor. But he couldn't find the real Vasiliev. He asked everyone. Partisans from other detachments, captured policemen before their execution, locals who had survived the occupation, he would describe. Tall, broad-shouldered, about 27, 28 years old, scar above the right eyebrow, Smolensk dialect, worked as a forester in Zabaly. Nobody knew, or they kept silent out of fear. Once, in the winter of 1944, they caught a policeman from the neighboring district. They interrogated him for a long time, harshly, methodically. Andrei was present, waiting. When the policeman started ratting everyone out, naming dozens of names, Andrei asked about Vasiliev. The policeman got flustered, then said he had heard such a name, that Vasiliev had served in a punitive battalion, participated in operations. But where he disappeared afterward, nobody knew. Maybe he was killed. Maybe he left with the Germans to the west. Maybe he was hiding. Andrei wanted to know more, but the policeman knew nothing else. They shot him at dawn. In the spring of 1944, the Red Army began its offensive. The partisan detachment joined the regular troops. Andrei was enlisted in an infantry regiment, given a new uniform, a new weapon, new documents. In the documents they wrote his age as 18 instead of 16, for the sake of order, for the regulations. Nobody checked, nobody asked. The war had no time for ages. Andrei fought all the way to Berlin, passed through Belarus, Poland, East Prussia. He saw destroyed cities, burned villages, concentration camps. He saw mountains of corpses, the ovens of crematoria, living skeletons of prisoners. He saw and was not surprised. After Krasnîi Bor, there was nothing left to be surprised about. He received 2 medals, for courage and for the liberation of Warsaw. He received a shrapnel wound in the shoulder during the battles for Königsberg. The shrapnel lodged in the bone. The surgeon removed it without anesthesia. Andrei did not scream. He was in the hospital when the war ended. On May 9th, 1945, he was not celebrating. He sat on his ward bed, looking out the window at the fireworks over Berlin and thinking only one thing: Vasiliev is alive. Andrei had not found him among the killed executioners, nor among the hanged traitors, nor among the shot prisoners. It means he is out there somewhere, free, living, breathing. Maybe he too is watching the fireworks and celebrating the victory. The thought was unbearable. Victory without justice is not a victory, but a mockery. After the hospital, the verification began. Everyone who had been encircled, among the partisans, in occupied territory, in captivity, went through filtering. The special SMERSH departments of the NKVD worked methodically, meticulously, mercilessly. The camps were overcrowded. Thousands of people awaited the decision of their fate. to return home, or to go to the Gulag. Andrei was sent to a filtration camp near Minsk. The camp was a territory surrounded by barbed wire, with barracks, watchtowers, searchlights. Inside, bunk beds, slop buckets, queues for watery soup. The regime was stricter than in a military unit, but milder than in a prison. It was a zone of uncertainty, where a man ceased to be a soldier but had not yet become a prisoner or a free man. The verification lasted 3 weeks. Andrei was lucky. He had witnesses, recommendations from the partisan detachment commander and the regiment commander, military decorations, documents. They interrogated him every day, for hours on end. The same questions, different officers. Where had he been? What had he done? Whom had he seen? With whom had he served? Who could confirm? Andrei answered calmly, in detail, without getting tangled. There was no point in lying. Everything was checked. In the second week of verification, he decided to try to find Vasiliev through the system. He approached a Smersh officer, a young major with a tired face and a cigarette dangling from his lips, and laid out his story. Briefly, without emotion, like a report. The village of Krasnîi Bor. Punitive operation, 213 killed. The executioner, Petru Grigorovich Vasiliev, from the village of Zabeli. Description: request for help in finding him. The major listened, took notes, nodded. He said they would check, that he would pass on the information, that if Vasiliev was in the database, they would find him. Andrei believed him. 1 week later, the major called him in again. His face was even more tired. He said they had checked. Petru Grigorovich Vasiliev, from the village of Zabeli, Bryansk region, is listed as missing without a trace since 1944. The village of Zabeli was burned by partisans in year 44 for collaboration with the occupiers. The inhabitants were partly shot, partly fled. There is no exact data on Vasiliev. There are no witnesses. Maybe he was killed. Maybe he is hiding under a false name. Maybe he left for the West with the retreating Germans. The major further explained that there are thousands like Vasiliev, that half the country is looking for executioners, policemen, traitors, that the system is overloaded, that there aren't enough people, time, resources for everyone, that if there is concrete data, name, place of service, battalion number, witnesses, then they can search. But if it's just a name, an approximate age, and a scar, that's not evidence, it's nothing. That he must live on, work, raise children, build the country, that the war is over. Andrei listened and understood. The system would not help. Too many cases, too little time. Vasiliev was just one of thousands. A run-of-the-mill executioner, not a leader, not a commander, not an organizer, just an ordinary murderer. They don't search for such people first. Such people are searched for years, by chance, based on a denunciation, out of pure luck. Andrei was released after 3 weeks, given a certificate of passing the filtration, new documents, permission to return to his place of residence. His place of residence was an empty place. Krasnîi Bor no longer existed. No one intended to rebuild it. He decided to return there one last time, to say goodbye, to put up a memorial sign, to fulfill his duty to the dead. He arrived in 2 weeks, by trains, by hitchhiked trucks, on foot. The roads were destroyed, the bridges blown up, the stations demolished. The country was recovering slowly, arduously, painfully. When he reached the place where Krasnîi Bor had been, he didn't immediately realize he had arrived. The village was completely gone, no houses, no barns, no church, just a field overgrown with weeds, and young birch trees, the charred skeletons of stoves, tilted gateposts. Nature was reclaiming its own. Grass pushed through the ash, bushes covered the burned hearths. Birds were building nests in the charred beams. Someone had put up a wooden post with an inscription, carved with a knife. Here was Krasnîi Bor, burned by the fascists on August 23, 1943. Not a word about the executioners, about their own, about Vasiliev. Just fascists. Convenient, safe, impersonal. Andrei found the place where the barn had been, and there stood a cross, communal, wooden, with names burned into it. 213 names. Volkov Ivan Grigorovici, Volkova Anna Petrovna, Volkova Ekaterina Ivanovna. He stood before the cross for a long time, not knowing what to say. He wanted to ask for forgiveness for not being able to find the killer, but the words wouldn't come. What was the point of asking the dead for forgiveness? They don't hear. They are already where there is neither vengeance, nor justice, nor memory. He squatted down, ran his hand over the sun-warmed earth, covered with last year's leaves. It was quiet all around. Only the wind in the birch trees, only the singing of birds. As if the war had never happened, as if 213 people had not screamed here in agony. He stood up and looked around one more time, memorized this place forever, and left. He would not return here. In 1946, Andrei received a directive from the Komsomol for the construction of a metallurgical plant in the Urals. The city of Versetsk, an industrial hub in the mountains, where thousands of people like him had been gathered. Demobilized frontline soldiers, former prisoners, repatriates, simply those seeking work and oblivion. The country was rebuilding, building factories, smelting steel, casting iron. Hands were needed, many hands. Andrei became a worker. First a laborer on the construction site, carrying bricks, mixing mortar, digging trenches, then a lathe operator's apprentice, learning to turn parts, to work the lathe, then a third-category lathe operator. The work was hard, monotonous, exhausting, but he didn't complain. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 14. A dormitory with 8 people to a room, boiled water instead of tea, bread on ration cards. But this was life, not war, not death, not ashes, just life. He didn't drink, which was strange. Most frontline soldiers drank a lot, and often. They drowned their memories, their nightmares, their guilt in vodka. In the dormitory, after their shift, they would take out the samagon, sit on their beds, and start remembering the front. Andrei always left. He didn't like these discussions. The frontline soldiers lied, embellished their deeds of bravery, forgot the fear, invented heroism. Andrei remembered the truth and didn't want to share it. His comrades respected him, but didn't let him get close. They called him the quiet one, the strange one, the shell-shocked one. He didn't object. It was convenient to be strange. Fewer questions, less attention, less need to explain why you don't get married, don't drink, don't enjoy yourself. Sometimes at night, the dreams would take him. Always the same. The red sandals in the dust, his father's voice calling Vasiliev by name, the crackling of fire, the white stripe on the wrist, and the face. The scar above the eyebrow, the cold eyes, the gold watch on the wrist. He would wake up in a cold sweat, get up, wash his face with ice-cold water from the basin in the corridor, go out to smoke on the porch, look at the Ural sky, black and endless, at the factory lights in the distance, at the smoke from the chimneys. He would think about where he was now. That Vasiliev, if he was alive, if he remembered, if he slept peacefully, or if he too woke up at night, seeing the faces of the murdered. Time passed. 1947, 1900, 48, 1900, 49. Work, construction site, plan, exceeding the plan. Andrei received the 4th category, then the 5th. He moved from the dormitory into a room in a communal apartment, 8 square meters, but his own. He bought a record player, and one record with Utyosov. He hardly ever listened to it, but he liked that it was a sign of a normal life, which, in fact, did not exist. In 1950, a girl named Liza came to work at the factory, a young norm-setter with a braid down to her waist and a cheerful laugh. She was the first to talk to Andrei. She asked him why he was always alone, if he wasn't married, if he didn't want to go to the movies. Andrei answered curtly, "I'm not married. I don't go to the movies." She didn't give up. She invited him again, and again. They went to the movies 3 times, watched something about a collective farm, about a construction site, about love. Andrei didn't remember. Liza talked the whole time, laughed, took his hand. He was silent, watched the screen, felt awkward, alien. After the 3rd time, Liza asked him why he was so dead, so cold, as if there was no one inside him. Andrei didn't know what to answer. Liza never invited him anywhere again. She married another lathe operator 1 year later. a cheerful, lively, life-loving man. In 1952, the factory expanded, new workshops were built, people were hired, mainly from the villages, collective farmers driven by industrialization and poverty into the cities. They came with their families, with their bundles, with their children, settled in barracks, learned to work the lathes, got used to the city. Andrei hardly noticed them. They worked alongside him, greeted each other, sometimes asked for a tool. That was all. Faces passed, names were forgotten, their fates did not interest him. In 1953, Stalin died. Mourning was announced at the factory. Everyone stood by the loudspeakers, listening to the announcements. The women cried, the men took off their hats, silent. Andrei stood there too, but he didn't cry. He was thinking about something else. In Stalin's time, executioners were shot quickly, cruelly, exemplarily. Thousands went through tribunals. Thousands were hanged, shot. But what would happen now? Amnesty, forgiveness, oblivion. 2 months later, his fears were confirmed. The amnesty decree was issued. Common criminals, political prisoners, collaborators with short sentences were released. And the released began to arrive in Versetsk too. They got jobs at the factory, received housing, started over. Nobody asked what they had been in for. The country forgave, forgot, was building a new future without old scores. Andrei looked at these people and thought, maybe Vasiliev is among them? Maybe he also got 5 years, served time somewhere in Siberia, got out, changed his name, came here. How to find out, how to check. He began to look more closely at the new workers. He looked for tall, broad-shouldered men with scars on their faces. He found dozens of similar men, but none was Vasiliev. The voice wasn't the same, the dialect wasn't the same, the age wasn't the same, or simply too much time had passed and his memory was deceiving him. Andrei gradually began to lose hope. The oath remained, but the faith in its fulfillment was fading. He had begun to reconcile himself with the thought that Vasiliev was either long dead or forever unreachable, that justice would not happen, that the dead would remain unavenged. Life had become a habit. Wake up at 6, go to the factory, work until evening, return to the room, eat dinner, sleep, and again, day after day, year after year, mechanically, without joy, without purpose, simply because one must, because there is no other way. The 9th of May, 1954, was warm and clear. The veterans took their dress uniforms out of their trunks, polished their medals with a cloth and tooth powder. They gathered at the factory gate early in the morning. The 9th anniversary of the victory. It was an event. In the club, tables were set, a concert was prepared. The bosses, top workers, and activists were invited. Andrei didn't want to go. He never went to these celebrations. He didn't like the false speeches, the drunken toasts, the tears and embraces. The war hadn't been a holiday, but a nightmare that never ends. To celebrate the nightmare seemed to him a blasphemy, a betrayal of the dead. But the foreman insisted, said that everyone was going, that they had to show the veterans to the young people, that it was a patriotic duty. Andrei didn't argue. He didn't have the strength to argue. He put on his only suit, dark, still military style, altered twice, which had become tight in the shoulders and loose in the waist. He pinned on his medals, for courage, and for the victory over Germany. He looked at himself in the cracked mirror above the sink in the communal hallway. The reflection was alien. 26 years old, but he looked 40, gray at the temples, deep wrinkles from his eyes to his cheekbones, back hunched, gaze dull. The war had eaten his youth and given nothing back, only emptiness, fatigue, a shadow of life instead of life. The factory club was packed. It smelled of cologne, Makorka tobacco, and alcohol, which they had already started drinking in the smoking room. On the stage hung portraits of Lenin, Malenkov, Khrushchev, red flags, slogans, and flowers. The orchestra was tuning its instruments. The veterans occupied the front rows. Andrei sat in the last row, near the wall, from where he had a good view of the exit. An old partisan habit, to always sit so he could see the exit and those who entered. The solemn meeting began. The factory director spoke about labor achievements, about the 5-year plan, about peace. Then the secretary of the party committee spoke, about vigilance, about imperialists, about the unity of the Soviet people. Andrei listened half-distractedly. The words were familiar, repetitive, empty. Then they began to invite the veterans onto the stage. There were about 15 men, frontline soldiers, partisans, home front workers. Each had to tell their story. The first to come out was an old man, a former tank driver, his face full of burn scars. He had burned in the Kursk Bulge. He spoke. Hoarsely, briefly. I fought. I burned. I survived. Here I am. The hall applauded. The second was a signalman, still young, cheerful, telling anecdotes about life at the front. The hall laughed. The third, a nurse, cried, remembering the wounded. The fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Andrei sat and stared blankly. He wanted all this to end quickly. And then the announcer said, "Now, the floor is given to Petru Ivanovich Sokolov, head of Workshop 3, Knight of the Order of the Red Star, partisan in the Bryansk forests." The hall burst into applause. Andrei did not applaud. He raised his eyes to the stage. A man of about 37, 38 years was climbing onto the stage. Tall, broad-shouldered, sturdy, with a neat haircut and in a new suit. He was smiling broadly, confidently. He waved to the hall, approached the microphone, adjusted his tie, and when he raised his hand, an old gold pocket watch gleamed on his wrist. Andrei stopped breathing. His father's watch. The watch he had seen 1,000 times at breakfast, at lunch, in the field. The watch his father wound every morning, carefully, with 2 fingers. Andrei slowly moved his gaze from the watch to the face. The face was older, fuller. A mustache had appeared, neat, trimmed, hair slicked back with brilliantine, but the features were the same. The heavy chin, the wide nose, the deep-set eyes, and above the right eyebrow, a white, thin scar, almost invisible in the folds of the skin. But Andrei remembered it. He remembered seeing it through the cellar crack 11 years ago. It was him, Petru Grigorovich Vasiliev, become Petru Ivanovich Sokolov. The world around him disappeared. Only the watch, the face, and the voice remained, which began to speak into the microphone. The voice was the same. The Smolensk dialect had smoothed out, become more neutral, but the bass remained. The same intonations, the same way of drawing out vowels, the same confidence. Sokolov began to tell his story. He said he had fought in a partisan detachment in the Bryansk forests since 1942, that they had beaten the fascists' burned depots, blown up echelons, liberated villages, that he personally had participated in dozens of operations, had been wounded twice, received the order that the war was terrible but just. Andrei listened and couldn't believe it. This man was lying. Lying easily, habitually, calmly. He described deeds of bravery that had never happened, passed himself off as a hero while being a murderer. And then Sokolov said, "In August 1943 we received information that the Germans were preparing a punitive operation against the village of Krasnîi Bor. The village was considered a partisan base. Our fighters' families were there. We came to help. The Germans had already begun the execution, but we stopped them. The fight was fierce. We lost 3 comrades, but we saved the village. We led the inhabitants out into the forest, then sent them behind the front lines. It was one of our most important operations. A lie. A monstrous, shameless, perfect lie." Andrei gripped the arms of the chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His temples began to throb, his vision darkened. He wanted to get up, to run onto the stage, to grab this wretch by the throat, to snatch the watch, to throw it in his face, to scream the truth. He wanted to, but he couldn't. His body wouldn't obey. He sat as if paralyzed and watched. Sokolov continued. He said that after the war he was demobilized, came to the Urals, works at the factory, is raising children, building communism, that he is proud of his past, that the war taught him to value life and peace. The hall applauded, standing. Women wiped their tears with handkerchiefs. The factory director shook Sokolov's hand, clapped him on the shoulder. The party committee secretary embraced him. The orchestra began to play a march. Sokolov smiled, bowed, stepped down from the stage. The watch gleamed on his wrist. Andrei sat in the last row and couldn't move. His hands were trembling, his breath caught. Cold sweat ran down his back. Something hot and wet ran down his face. Sweat or tears. Vasiliev is alive, here, 20 meters away. Living, working, lying, wearing another's watch and another's merits. Workshop head, decorated with an order, a respected man, a hero. And Krasnîi Bor is still burning in Andrei's memory. Every night, every day. The meeting ended. The concert began. Songs were sung, dances performed, poems read, then the tables were spread. Vodka, herring, potatoes, cucumbers. The veterans sat at a long table, began to drink, to toast, to remember, to embrace. Andrei sat at a separate table, in the corner, not drinking, not eating. He watched. Sokolov sat at the presidium, in the center, next to the director, the party committee secretary, other bosses. He drank little, smiled, accepted congratulations. The watch gleamed on his wrist. Andrei did not take his eyes off him. The foreman approached, tried to convince him to drink to victory. Andrei refused. The brigadier, already drunk, wanted to insist, but he saw Andrei's face and backed away. His face was like stone. An hour later, Andrei got up and left the club. Outside it was getting dark. The air was warm, smelling of lilac and factory smoke. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks were bursting. They were launching them from the square. Andrei leaned against the club wall, lit a cigarette, took a deep drag, tried to calm down, to gather his thoughts. He had found him. Finally. 11 years of searching, 11 years of swearing an oath. And there he was, 20 meters away, alive, healthy, respected. Petru Grigorovici Vasiliev, from the village of Zabeli, the executioner, the murderer of 213 people, now Petru Ivanovici Sokolov, section head. Decorated with an order, a hero. Well, now what? Kill him right here, now. Take a knife from the canteen, wait for him to come out, strike him in the heart? Pointless. They would catch him in a minute, they would lock him up, they would shoot him. And what's the point? Vasiliev would die, but the truth would remain buried. Everyone would believe a hero was killed, a partisan, a good man, and Andrei would become a murderer, a mad envier. Report him to the KGB, write a statement, expose everything, demand an investigation. But what proof? The watch. Sokolov would say he bought it at the market or inherited it from his grandfather or found it during the war. The scar. Thousands of people have scars on their faces. The war, accidents, beatings. The name and patronymic, Petru Ivanovici, one of the most widespread combinations, and the surname Sokolov, the third most frequent in Russia. How to prove that he is specifically Vasiliev? Witnesses are needed. People are needed who knew Vasiliev before the war, who saw him in Krasnîi Bor. Who can identify him? But who? The village of Zabeli was burned by partisans in the year 44 for collaboration. The Smersh major had spoken about it. The inhabitants are either dead or fled. Krasnîi Bor is also dead, all killed. There are no witnesses. Or are there? Andrei remembered. There was another village nearby, Malinki, 5 versts away, and someone from there had served in the police. Maybe someone survived? Maybe someone knew Vasiliev? Served with him? Can identify him? He must be sought, slowly, carefully, patiently gathering evidence piece by piece. The watch is a clue, but insufficient. More is needed. Certainty is needed, absolute, undeniable, and a plan is needed, clear, well thought out, without fail. Andrei finished smoking, threw the butt, crushed it, turned around and started slowly towards home. A plan was already forming in his head. He had waited 11 years. He could wait a little longer, a month, 2, a year. It didn't matter. The important thing was to do everything right. The oath would be fulfilled. Definitely. The next day, Andrei did not go to work. He said he was sick. His stomach hurt, poisoning. He needed to stay in bed. The brigadier did not object. After the holiday, half the section didn't show up for work. Andrei stayed in his room, sat at the table, took out a notebook and a pencil, began to write. What is known for sure? Petru Grigorovici Vasiliev, from the village of Zabeli, Bryansk region. Age around 38. 40 years. Scar above the right eyebrow. Worked as a forester before the war. During the war served in the police or in a punitive battalion. Participated in the destruction of the village of Krasnîi Bor on August 23, 1943. After the war changed his surname to Sokolov, moved to the Urals, got a job at the factory, received the Order of the Red Star, works as head of Section 3. What needs to be proven? That Petru Ivanovich Sokolov and Petru Grigorovich Vasiliev are one and the same person. That he is not a partisan, but an executioner. That the order was obtained through deception. That he is a war criminal hiding from justice. How to prove it? Find Vasiliev's documents. Find witnesses who knew him before the war or served with him. Prove that the watch belonged to Andrei's father. Find inconsistencies in Sokolov's biography. Detect the lie in his decoration documents. Andrei started with the watch. He had to prove it belonged to his father. On the lid was an engraving, the initials, and the year. Andrei wrote from memory. GV 1891, Grigory Alexievich Volkov, Andrei's paternal grandfather. The watch was passed from grandfather to father. From his father it should have passed to Andrei. But how to prove it? There were no photographs, no documents, no witnesses. The village had been burned, the archives lost. Or maybe not all. Andrei remembered that in Bryansk there was a regional archive. Maybe some records were preserved there, metric registers, lists of inhabitants, tax documents. Maybe there were mentions of the watch, inheritance, an inventory of goods, something. He had to go to Bryansk to check. But first he had to find out more about Sokolov himself. Where he had lived before moving to the Urals, when he had arrived. What documents he had presented when hired. Who had given him a recommendation. Where he had received the order. Andrei decided to act cautiously. He must not attract attention. He must not ask direct questions. He had to gather information quietly, discreetly, in pieces. He started with the Human Resources Department. Got a half-time job there under the pretext of helping to sort old files. Offered to do it for free in his spare time, for which he received approval. The HR manager, an elderly woman named Antonina Feodorovna, was glad for the help. Many papers had accumulated. There was no one to systematize them. Andrei patiently sorted the folders, sewed the files, made lists, and at the same time, searched. He found Sokolov's personal file 2 weeks later. Petru Ivanovich Sokolov, year of birth, 1916. Place of birth, Borky village, Smolensk region. Education, 4 classes at the church parish school. Before the war worked as a tractor driver at the MTS. Conscripted in 1939. Served in the Finnish War. In 1941 was encircled. Joined a partisan detachment. Fought until the year 1944. Decorated with the Order of the Red Star for saving the detachment commander in battle. Demobilized in 1946. Came to the Urals with a Komsomol travel warrant. Got a job at the factory as an auxiliary worker. Advanced to section head. Everything seemed plausible. The documents were in order. The demobilization certificate, the decoration sheet, the recommendation from the secretary of the district party committee, the character reference, but Andrei saw inconsistencies. First, the place of birth. Sokolov had indicated Borky village, Smolensk region. Andrei knew the Smolensk region, had fought there, knew the villages. There were several Borky villages. Which one exactly, the file did not specify. Second, the speech. Sokolov spoke with a slight Smolensk accent but not pronounced, as if trying to hide it, to soften it. Why? Third, the scar. In the personal file, under distinguishing marks, it said, scar above the right eyebrow, obtained from a work accident in the year 1938. But Andrei remembered exactly. Vasiliev had gotten that scar while hunting, from a wild boar, just before the year 1938. His father had told this story. Vasiliev used to brag about how he had fought the boar alone, how the tusk had touched his eyebrow. Fourth, the order. The decoration sheet said, decorated for saving the commander of the partisan detachment Kovalyov PA in the Battle of June 20th, 1943. But on August 23rd of the same year, Vasiliev was already an executioner in Krasnîi Bor. How was this possible? Either he had deserted from the partisans, or the decoration sheet was fake. Andrei, carefully, when Antonina Feodorovna went out, transcribed all the data into his notebook. Sokolov's address, the names of his wife and children, the passport number, date of issue, series, everything. Then he began to look for witnesses. First, he had to find those who had served in the partisan detachment with Sokolov. If he had really been a partisan until the year 43, then there should be comrades who remembered him. If not, it means he was lying. Andrei wrote a letter to the military commissariat in the Bryansk region. He stated the request to help find former partisans from the detachment under Kovalyov's command, which had operated in the Bryansk forests in the years 1942, 1944. He indicated the reason: searching for frontline comrades for a veterans meeting. He sent the letter and began to wait. The answer came a month later. The military commissariat informed that Kovalyov's detachment had indeed existed. The commander Kovalyov Pavel Andreevich had perished in the year 1944. The list of former fighters of the detachment was attached. 34 people. The addresses of some were known. Andrei scanned the list. The surname Sokolov was not there. The surname Vasiliev was not there either. This was not definitive proof. The lists could be incomplete. Someone could have served under a false name. Someone might not have been registered. But it was a thread to hang on to. Andrei chose 3 fighters whose addresses were indicated and wrote them letters. He introduced himself as a former partisan, invoked their common past, asked them to help remember the comrade-in-arms Petru Sokolov, who claimed to have served in Kovalyov's detachment. He described his features, the date of the heroic deed, asked if they remembered him. The replies came 2 months later. All 3 responded the same. They did not remember such a man in the detachment. Yes, there had been many fighters. Some had perished, others had left. But if a man had performed a heroic deed and saved the commander, they would have remembered. Especially in June 1943, when the detachment was still small, everyone knew each other. One of the fighters, a former scout named Gromov, wrote in more detail. Commander Kovalyov was indeed saved once, but that was in August 1942, and a fighter named Zhuk saved him, who died later. No one had heard of Sokolov or Vasiliev. This was already serious. Sokolov's decoration sheet was a fake. The order had been obtained through deception, but how to prove it officially? Witness testimonies recorded in a protocol were needed. Document expertise was needed. An investigation was needed. And for that, he had to go to the KGB. But for now it was early. The evidence was still scarce. Andrei decided to go to Bryansk to check the archives, to find documents in Vasiliev's name, to prove that he had existed, that he was from Zabeli, that he had served as a policeman. He took 2 weeks' leave, said he was going to relatives, got on the train, and left. Bryansk was slowly recovering. The city had been almost completely destroyed during the war, and now it was being rebuilt from scratch, brick by brick, street by street. Everywhere construction sites, cranes, trucks, dust, noise, shouts of workers. Andrei found the regional archive on the outskirts of the city, in a surviving building of a former gymnasium. The building was old, gray, with peeling plaster. Inside it smelled of damp, old paper and mold. The archive director, a withered woman of about 50, greeted him with suspicion, asked him what he needed, who he was, why he needed the documents. Andrei explained that he was looking for information about relatives who had perished during the war, wanted to restore the family tree. The director softened a bit, but warned him. Many documents had been lost during the bombings. Many had been taken by the Germans. Many simply had not been preserved. Andrei asked for access to the metric registers, lists of village inhabitants, police archives from the occupation period. The metric registers for Krasnîi Bor were partially preserved. Andrei found the record of his father's birth, his parents' marriage, his and his sister's birth. He found the death record of his grandfather, Grigory Alexievich Volkov, in the year 1927, where in the assets column it was mentioned. Gold pocket watch with engraving, passed by inheritance to his son Ivan Grigorievich Volkov. This was the proof. The watch had existed, had belonged to his grandfather, had passed to his father. Andrei asked for a copy of the record. The director made an extract, stamped it. Next, Andrei searched for information about Vasiliev. He found the metric register for the village of Zabeli. The records were few. The village was small. He found the birth record of Petru Grigorovich Vasiliev, son of Grigory Ivanovich and Marfa Stepanovna. Date of birth: March 15, 1916. It matched Sokolov's age. He found a record of Vasiliev's work as a supervisor at the forestry district from 1934 to 1941. Further records were interrupted. The occupation period: blank. But at the end of the file, Andrei found a list of inhabitants of the village of Zaboli, compiled by partisans after liberation, in the year 1944. The list was divided into two parts: the fallen and collaborators with the occupiers. In the collaborators with the occupiers part it was mentioned: Vasiliev Petru Grigorovich, served in the police from the year 1942, participated in reprisal operations. Location unknown, wanted. This was it, the proof. Vasiliev, policeman, executioner, wanted. Andrei asked for a copy. The director frowned, said these were secret documents pertaining to state security. Copies were not given just like that. Andrei explained that this man had killed his family, that he wanted to hand the document over to the KGB, that it was a matter of justice. The director thought, then nodded, made the extract, stamped it, but warned him, if there were problems, she knew nothing. Andrei received the document and left the archive. In his hands he had two papers: proof that the watch had belonged to his father, and proof that Vasiliev was a wanted executioner. It remained to be proven that Sokolov and Vasiliev were one and the same person. For that, witnesses were needed. Living people, who had known Vasiliev, who could recognize him. Andrei left for Zabeli, more precisely for the place where it had been. The village had been burned by partisans in the year 44, just like Krasnîi Bor, likewise, to the foundations. A desolate place remained, covered with weeds. No plaque, no cross, as if it had never existed. Andrei asked in the neighboring villages, did anyone from Zabeli survive? Did anyone leave before the war? Did anyone return after? An old man was found in the village of Malinki. Ivan Kuzmichi, 80 years old, half-blind, but with a clear memory. He remembered Zabeli. He remembered Vasiliev, he told. Petru Vasiliev was tall, strong, with a white scar on his forehead, above his eyebrow, from a wild boar hunt. He worked as a supervisor, liked to drink, liked to fight. When the Germans came, he became a policeman. Either voluntarily, or they forced him. He participated in raids against partisans, in executions. After the war, he disappeared, either killed or fled. Andrei asked him if the old man could recognize Vasiliev if he saw a photograph. The old man replied, "My sight is weak, but I remember his face. If you show it to me large, I'll recognize him." Andrei asked the old man to wait, promised he would return, noted his address, thanked him. Now he needed a photograph of Sokolov. At the factory there were boards with the photographs of production leaders, of section heads. Sokolov was there, large, front-facing. Andrei returned to the Urals. 4 months had already passed since the day he had seen Vasiliev on stage. 4 months of silent, methodical work. Now, he had proof that the watch had belonged to his father. Proof that Vasiliev was a wanted executioner. A witness who could recognize Vasiliev. Proof that Sokolov's decoration sheet was a fake. The last thing remained, to get Sokolov's photograph and show it to the witness. Photographing Sokolov was harder than it seemed. A camera at the factory existed only in the HR department. They could only use it for official purposes. Stealing the photograph from the board was risky. They would notice, they would start searching, they would make a fuss. Andrei decided to proceed differently. He waited for the factory celebration, the factory anniversary, on November 7th. Again there was a concert. Again the bosses gathered. Again Sokolov spoke on stage. Andrei came with a camera, borrowed from an acquaintance in a neighboring section, under the pretext of a family photo. He photographed Sokolov a few times, up close, from the front, from the side, returned the camera, developed the film, printed the pictures. They came out well. The face was clear. The scar was visible. In December, Andrei went to Bryansk again. He found the old man Ivan Kuzmichi in Malenki, showed him the photograph. The old man looked for a long time, squinting, bringing it close to his eyes, moving it away, then nodded. "It's him, Vasiliev. He's gotten old, grown a mustache. But it's him. The scar is the same, the face the same. It's definitely Petru Grigorovich from Zabalie. Andrei asked the old man to give a written statement. The old man agreed. They went to the village council, where the secretary wrote the old man's testimony from dictation. He signed. They put the stamp. Now Andrei had all the evidence. The last thing remained, to hand them over to the KGB and wait. In January 1955, Andrei went to the city directorate of the KGB in Verkhosetsk. A small building on the central street, gray, with an iron door and a guard at the entrance. Andrei said he wanted to make a statement about a war criminal. The guard called upstairs. 10 minutes later, an officer came down, a major, young, about 30 years old. The officer led Andrei to an office on the 3rd floor. A small office, a table, 2 chairs, Lenin's portrait, a safe. He offered him a seat, took out a notebook. Andrei laid everything out. Briefly, to the point, without emotion. He told about Krasnîi Bor, about Vasiliev, about Sokolov, about the watch, about the evidence. He put the documents on the table, the archive extracts, the witness's testimony, the photograph, the letters from the former partisans. The major listened, took notes, nodded. Then he took the documents, studied them for a long time, cross-referenced them. Then he looked at Andrei. "Why did you wait so long?" 9 years have passed since the war, Andrei replied. "I was looking for him. I didn't know where he was. I only found him recently." The major nodded, said it was a serious case, that there would be an investigation, that it would take time. He asked Andrei to leave all the documents, noted his address, told him to wait to be summoned. Andrei left the documents and left. A week passed, then another. Andrei went to work, worked mechanically, waited. He didn't know what was happening, if the investigation was proceeding, if they were checking Sokolov. Sokolov walked through the factory as usual, calm, self-assured, smiling. He greeted the workers, checked the fulfillment of the plan, gave speeches at meetings. The watch shone on his wrist. 3 weeks later, Andrei was summoned to the KGB, the same major, the same office. The major said the verification had been carried out. Vasiliev was indeed listed as wanted since the year 1944, as a collaborator with the occupiers and participant in reprisal operations. Sokolov indeed matched the description suspiciously well. Sokolov's decoration sheet was checked through the archives. Fake. Such a battle and such a heroic deed had not existed. The watch. The expertise confirmed. Old piece. The engraving matches the description in the archive. The case was transferred to the prosecutor's office. An arrest, investigation, and trial would follow. Andrei asked, "When?" The major replied, "Soon, a week, maybe 2. The documents need to be finalized, the warrant obtained, the operation prepared." Andrei nodded and left. Sokolov was arrested on February 7, 1955, right at the factory, during his work shift. Andrei did not see the arrest itself. He was in his section, at the other end of the factory. But the rumors spread instantly. It was said that men in civilian clothes had come, showed the documents to the director, then entered Section 3, approached Sokolov right next to his lathe, told him something quietly. Sokolov at first didn't understand, then turned pale, tried to object, but they took him by the arms and led him towards the exit. The workers watched, not understanding what was happening. Someone asked, "What happened?" One of the men in civilian clothes answered briefly, "A state matter." They took Sokolov out the gate, put him in a black car, and drove him away. Panic started at the factory. Rumors circulated. Spy, saboteur, embezzler, murderer. Nobody knew the truth. The director called an emergency meeting but didn't explain anything. He only said that Sokolov was temporarily suspended from his position. A check was being made. Details would be communicated later. Andrei remained silent. He didn't tell anyone that he had written the statement, that it was his case. He feared the reaction. What if they didn't believe him? What if they accused him of denunciation, of envy, of slander? He waited for the official announcement. The announcement appeared a week later in the factory newspaper. A small note on the 3rd page. Petru Ivanovich Sokolov, head of Section 3, has been arrested on suspicion of war crimes committed during the Great Patriotic War. The investigation is ongoing. Details will be communicated after the trial. The reaction was diverse. Some didn't believe it. It can't be. Petru Ivanovich is a good man, a hero, an order-bearer. Others remembered oddities. Yes, he was always somewhat awkward when the war was discussed, avoided details, got tangled in specifics. Some rejoiced in another's misfortune. I always knew the bosses were rotten. Andrei remained silent and waited. The investigation lasted 4 months. During this time, the KGB found more witnesses. 2 former inhabitants of neighboring villages, who recognized Vasiliev from the photograph, confirmed that he had served as a policeman, participated in reprisal operations. They found documents in the German archives, brought from Germany, in the list of policemen, where Vasiliev Petru Grigorovich was listed. They checked Sokolov's documents. The passport had been issued in the year 1946, based on a certificate from a village council that no longer existed. The certificate was fake. Sokolov, under interrogation, at first denied everything. He said he was being confused, that he wasn't Vasiliev, that he had served as a partisan, that the documents were authentic. But when they showed him the archival documents, the witness testimonies, the watch expertise, he broke. He confessed. He told how after the war he understood he would be shot for his crime, how he decided to hide, how he obtained false documents through an acquaintance, how he changed his surname, how he left for the Urals, where nobody knew him, how he got a job at the factory, how he faked the decoration sheet through the same acquaintance, how he received the order, how he lived, fearing every day he would be found. But over the years, the fear subsided, and he believed he had escaped punishment. To the question about Krasnîi Bor, he answered briefly. It was an order. I executed it. Does he regret it? No. It was war then. It was a choice. Them or us. I chose myself. About the watch, he said he took it from a dead man. He liked it. He took it. He didn't think it would become evidence. The investigation ended in June 1955. The case was sent to trial. The trial took place in July, at the Verkhosetsk City Court. The trial was public. The room was full. Workers from the factory came, journalists, representatives from the KGB, the prosecutor's office, the party. Andrei was summoned as a witness. Sokolov was brought in under guard. He looked bad. He had lost weight, aged, was pale, had shaved his mustache. His hands were shaking. He stared at the floor. The judge read the indictment: collaboration with the enemy, participation in reprisal operations, murder of civilians, falsification of documents, obtaining a decoration through deception. By accumulation, the death penalty. The trial lasted 3 days. The witnesses were questioned. Andrei, the old man Ivan Kuzmichi, the former partisans, the investigators, all confirmed his guilt. Andrei told about Krasnîi Bor, about his family, about the watch. He spoke calmly, without emotion, like a report. Sokolov listened, without raising his eyes. The defender tried to mitigate the guilt. He said Sokolov had acted under duress, that the Germans had forced him, that he had not commanded, but only executed orders. But the prosecutor objected. There are witnesses who saw how Sokolov personally shot, how he commanded the execution, how he took the belongings of the murdered. This is not duress, it is complicity and personal initiative. Sokolov was given the last word. He stood up, looked at the courtroom, then at Andrei, said quietly, I am guilty. I knew that sooner or later they would find me. I just wanted to live a little longer. I ask for forgiveness, but I understand I will not be forgiven. It's fair. He sat down. The court recessed to deliberate, returned an hour later. The verdict: guilty on all counts. The punishment: execution by firing squad. The sentence is final. It is not subject to appeal. Sokolov was taken out. The courtroom began to murmur. Andrei sat and stared blankly. The oath had been fulfilled. Sokolov was shot on September 14, 1955 at the prison in Sverdlovsk. Andrei was notified by letter. The sentence has been executed. The body has been cremated. The case is closed. Andrei received the letter at work, read it, folded it, put it in his pocket, finished his shift, returned home, sat on the bed. He sat for a long time, motionless. He thought he should feel relief, joy, satisfaction, but he felt nothing. The same emptiness as 12 years ago, in the cellar. Vasiliev was dead. Justice had been done. The oath had been fulfilled. But mother, father, Katyusha would not return. Krasnîi Bor would not rise from the ashes. 213 lives could not be brought back. Revenge was complete, but it had not brought what he expected. It had not healed, had not returned meaning, had not resurrected the dead. Just one more death, one more point on an endless list. Andrei took a small wooden box from a desk drawer, opened it. Inside was the gold pocket watch with the engraving G.A.V. in 1891. They had returned it to him after the trial, as material evidence belonging to the injured party. He took the watch in his hands, ran his finger over the engraving, turned it over. The watch was ticking, slowly, regularly, as if 12 years had not passed, as if time could be turned back. But it could not be turned back. The next day, Andrei took a week's leave, got on the train, and left for Bryansk. From there, by hitchhiking, he reached the place where Krasnîi Bor had been. The place had become even more overgrown. The birch trees had grown taller, the grass thicker. The poor charred ovens had almost disappeared under the ground. The cross had tilted, the inscriptions had faded. Soon, no trace would remain. Andrei found a place near the cross, squatted down, took out the watch, placed it on the ground in front of the cross, said quietly, "I have avenged you, as I promised. He is dead. Justice is done. Sleep in peace." He stayed a little longer, then got up and left. He left the watch. Let it remain there with them, in the earth where it was supposed to be. He never returned to Krasnîi Bor. Life went on. Andrei worked at the factory for another 30 years. He retired, received the Veteran of Labor Medal. He never married, never had children. He lived alone, quietly, unnoticed. Sometimes at night he had dreams, but now they were different. Not fire, not screams, not the red sandals, but silence. An empty field, covered with grass, and a cross under which 213 souls sleep, and a gold watch, ticking in the earth.